Okay, it is 5:30. So I think we've got the Board of Selectmen members here and Kate and Jen. I think we will get started. I'm sure other people will join us. Kate, I think we should probably talk about a little bit of the sort of the technology ground rules tonight, right? We're going to go through, we have a whole series of general government sections that we're going to go through tonight. Kate and Jen are both organizers. Kate is going to be sharing her screen for the appropriate sections that we're going to be reviewing tonight. We ask that if you are a member of the Board of Finance or the Finance and Budget Committee of the RTM, there will be time to address your questions. I'll try and follow this as closely as we have in the past when we're in person. So at the end of each budget sort of department, we will have board discussion, board questions, and then we'll move to Board of Finance and Budget questions. But please feel free to type your questions into the chat or type into the chat when your time comes that you'd like to ask a question, and then we will recognize you. There's one housekeeping item that I would like to address before we start tonight, and that is, although we don't have a charter or statutory requirement for a quote-unquote public hearing of the Board of Selectmen budget, we usually reserve that for when our budget gets passed to the Board of Finance. I'd like to get input from my Board of Selectmen members this evening to ask if you'd like to add a public hearing night on the evening of Wednesday, February 3rd. That's prior to our final deliberations about the budget. You know, we're in this unique sort of distanced posture, and we want to make sure that everybody who wants to have a say can have a say. So I open it up for comments or questions, but I am formally recommending that we add a Board of Selectmen public hearing to our budget agenda for Wednesday, February 3rd. So I'll turn to Sarah to see if you have any, if you concur, questions, comments.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. We should always offer that.
Okay. Krista.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I thought we had discussed that before at one of our other meetings, but when we were talking about the calendar, but absolutely, we should have an opportunity for the public to opine before we vote on our budget and presenting it to the Board of Finance.
Okay, David.
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay, Kip.
I'm fine with it. Thank you.
Perfect. Then I'll entertain a motion to organize and publish a public hearing evening for Wednesday, February 3rd at 7 p.m. Sarah moves. May I have a second? Krista seconds. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, motion carries. That's great. Having said that, you know, we will have a formal public hearing, even though it's not required by charter. At any point in time, any member of the public or any other elected or appointed officials, if you have questions about the Board of Selectmen budget, please send them to Kate or me, and we'll make sure that they get answered during our budget deliberation process. Okay, with that, I am going to turn it to Kate.
Okay, so first, one quick housekeeping item. For non-members of the Board of Selectmen and non-staff, we'd ask you to keep your webcams off. That makes it a little easier for the Board of Selectmen in the meeting. Board of Selectmen, if you want to see only those with active webcams, in the center of your screen, there's a little, you see it says view everyone. It's got arrows next to it. You can change that so that you see only the person who's talking, only the active cameras, or you can hide everyone. When I'm in, then I'll open the screen up, start sharing my screen, and we'll talk a little bit also about how you can move around on the screen once it's being shared.
Perfect.
Thank
And
you.
then I think lastly, I'd like to ask that the members of the Board of Selectmen also mute your microphone while Kate is presenting. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so you now should be seeing a worksheet that I did mail out to the Board of Selectmen prior to the meeting. If you want to see it, if you want to enlarge when I'm sharing the screen, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should have something that lets you make the screen bigger or smaller. Towards the right-hand side of your screen, you can enlarge it. There's another button that lets you basically detach the camera view. That can help make your screen bigger. And then if you need to scroll up or down on the screen that I'm sharing, because you've made it too big to fit all on your screen. If you left click in the screen share and then roll your mouse up and down, or if you have a trackball, you can roll that up and down. So right now, the first thing I'm showing you is something that Jen put together, and I'm actually going to make it bigger on my screen, so hopefully that'll be easier for you. If you want to get to the Board of Finance's target of a 3% increase from the prior year, if we don't adjust for some of the capital funding that they did last year, you would need to cut $3.3 million out of this budget. And this is excluding debt service. If we adjust capital, the 21 capital for the other funding sources they used last year, you'd need to cut about $1.8 million out of the budget. The other spreadsheet that I'd sent to you earlier shows how that calculation was arrived at. And I would tell you, you start at the top. This top line that's shaded in blue is putting the 2 years on even footing. And then you see down here in the fiscal 21, the other sources of funding that the Board of Finance used to support capital that normally would have been in the RFC NRE budget last year. And then you get to the bottom, and this is where the appearance of, but this top line really puts them on an even footing to show if it had been funded like normal or like we're proposing for this year, that's what the increase would have looked like. So before I move on, any questions from the selectmen on that? Okay, not seeing any.
Can't say as I follow it.
Kip?
I didn't understand it, frankly. I looked at it 3 times. I don't understand it. Sorry. I don't understand I don't understand the very top line, the blue line, when you say it's on equal footing.
Right, so last year, the total capital that the town expended or budgeted for was $3.9 million, okay? That's 3.1 for the selectmen and 850 for the Board of Ed. But then the Board of Finance chose to bond for some of those projects to the tune of $1.5 million. And they used contingency to fund some of the projects in fiscal 20. So they removed it from the budget. So there was basically $1.9 million in funding that we don't have available to us this year as a source, or at least at your level. So that's where I'm putting, if they hadn't done this bonding, if they hadn't taken the contingency money, the total budget for last year would have been $3.9 million as opposed to $2 million.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, can I jump in for 1 second? Because when we put this together, it linked to one file, or one sheet, but not the other. So can you go back to the year over year?
Yep.
Because there is an error in there. The adjustment for FY21 capital is actually 1,385,000. That's the 985 of bonding and the 400,000. So it's really yeah.
Even?
So,
close enough?
Yeah.
So is that
It's
right now?
1,385 even. Yep. So 1,920,000 is now the target reduction. Just so
Okay.
we're starting from the right place.
So just to put a fine point on this, you know, this is how our budget process always starts out. And the Board of Finance has certain tools that they can use to help fund projects in different ways. So it's no different this year than it was last year. I think what becomes, you know, startling to see is this, you know, 181% increase. And that's really, I think, what Kate and Jen are trying to address to help us look at this in a slightly different way, if I'm correct in saying that, Kate.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll start with the Board of Selectmen budget. So you can see, hopefully you've had a chance to read some of our accomplishments and objectives. This is the important, our staffing, we are proposing to increase it by 1/2 of a person. If you see, you know, one of the things that we did this year in the proposal details, you'll see some information. You know, part of it was a hope to put some things in perspective. So this budget, as a percentage of the total expenditure budget, it's less than 1% of the total budget. Year-over-year expenditure change is a high percentage, but $87,000 worth. And there is, as we said, the 1/2 of FTE increase. So the full-time salary line is the first selectman. The salary for the first selectman is set by the Board of Finance. With this being an election year, the Board of Finance should be evaluating that when they do their deliberations. And then there's one of the secretaries from our office is also carried in this budget. But basically, this budget is very much status quo with the exception of the part-time salary. This was to add a public information officer, which I brought up last night. And let me go back. So the reason for this is, you know, we learned during the pandemic how important communication with the public is. And we do not have a professional to do it. The communication that has been done with the public, it's been primarily Jamie with assistance from our administrative staff. I manage the social media. And we're not doing as good a job as we could of communicating with our citizens. And so this was an estimate of a part-time salary of $28,000 a year. Going back, the other notable increase in this line is professional services. We eliminated the intern that we got this year from UConn. When I say eliminated, we're not looking to continue that next year, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the intern, but other needs took precedence. So what we were looking for is funding for consultants to assist us in writing grants, possibly doing some design for wayfinding downtown, and a review of our emergency services departments, how they're structured, and that would involve emergency management, fire departments, to evaluate how we are doing them, what the best practices are, and to assist us in implementing them. Minor increase in software
Okay,
maintenance.
this is
Yeah,
Dave.
go ahead.
This is David. I'm just looking, and it shows the minus 16.5 where you're taking out the intern,
Yes.
but then the fourth line down has 16.5 for an intern.
Right,
So
they
I
zero
didn't
out.
quite understand.
They zero out. So that the budget started with the intern in there, and then I cut it back out.
Oh, that's how that works. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
The other minor increase in here is for software, and that is maintaining our board member database and the online index of our code. So do you have any questions on this budget?
I have a question. That is to say that $28,000 is not a lot of money to get you a public information officer. I know you put down the concept of maybe going outside and hiring an outside firm. Combine that with $75,000 for consultants for grants, wayfinding, and emergency services. It seems to me there's room to maybe improve on the public information officer expenditures, whether you do it internally or whether you decide to do it externally. And I think I would choose maybe one of those things for the grant, for the professional services side. I know that grants would be probably a big home run as a first try, but I don't know all the details. So that was just a thought process. I had one question. There was an operating transfer for $80,000 from the police special duty fund to administrative services. Could you explain that?
In the revenues?
Yeah.
Sure.
Wait, where are you, Kate? Just so.
I am on the Board of Selectmen revenues.
Mhm.
So the same tab I was on before.
No, yeah.
Okay, and then I'm going down to operating transfer.
Got it.
Okay. So when people hire our police officers for private duty, we tack on an administrative fee to cover the cost of billing and some of the payroll taxes. We don't pay all the payroll taxes on police officers, but we do have to pay some of them. So we also, the private duty fund every year reimburses the general fund for those costs that have been carried in the general fund.
So this is merely a reimbursement.
Yep. And
Okay,
it will
that
go up
item
and down
reads-
over the years depending on the activity. Sorry, David.
That item reads based on year-to-date 21 actual. So that's the year-to-date 21 actual annualized number, right? So 80,000 is the expectation for the annualized amount.
I would say yes. And I
Okay.
think I did this budget, but I would have done it a while ago. So
No. That I was just curious because if it's not annualized, the number is going to be different by whatever fact or whatever month
No, yeah.
was considered year-to-date, right?
yeah.
Krista,
Just staying on the grant and the consultant idea, did you put in corresponding, pardon me, revenue for the grants that this consultant would bring in?
No, I did not.
Would that be, may I ask why? Like, what was your thought behind that then? Is it just too
Because
unknown or?
It's too unknown. And the grant might not be a general fund revenue. It could
Okay,
be a capital fund.
okay, fair.
Yeah, there would always be an offsetting expenditure to a grant. You know, if we're pursuing a grant, it's for X project or X piece of equipment or electric vehicle charging stations, so there would be a corresponding expense.
Well, we do have 10,000 in the budget now for miscellaneous, state grants. And year to date, we're at 251 going to 10. So I didn't know if that was where you were thinking that number.
Is that pilot grant, Kate?
No.
Just as miscellaneous.
Yeah. Jen, do you know off the top of your head? It's usually
So
grants that we have no other place for.
Right, it's typically the Department of Emergency Management Services, the $10,000 of the Emergency Management Director's salary that they reimburse us. The 251 that we received to date includes a bunch of COVID money that's come in this year.
Oh, okay, so.
And these wouldn't be grants that we had to, when I say, we have to write a grant, like the grant that we were awarded, the STEEP grant, where we have to apply and make our case. The kind of grants that are going in here are usually grants that we didn't have to apply for.
Okay, fair enough.
Kate, you had mentioned to me that there are different ways of procuring grant writing services. Some require an outlay of money, like expenditure for professional service. Others are, they receive a percentage of whatever grant it is they're successful in procuring for us. Is that correct?
Correct. So, what I had done was reached out to members of the GFOA and to other members of the City Managers Association of the state of Connecticut. And basically there are three ways that people do it. Some have employees who do the grant writing. Some hire contractors or consultants to do it like as a retainer and or on a grant by grant basis. Others, they do it by paying for a, the grant consultant gets a cut of the proceeds.
So without knowing, today which way we want to go, it's possible that there would be no cash outlay depending on it, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. The other thing I want to talk about, just make a few brief comments. The downtown wayfinding has been something we've been talking about for a long time to help people find their way to municipal parking lots. This is a project that we will want to partner with the Chamber of Commerce and the Corbin District. And I know that David Genovese has expressed a desire to partner with the town on this wayfinding project. I don't know if we're going to be ready for this in the coming fiscal year. So that's something that I'd like to check on. We definitely want to make sure that we keep it on our list of things to do, but it might, this upcoming fiscal year might be too soon. The last thing I want to talk about briefly is the part-time PIO. I think it's a great idea. The hope would be that we would find someone who it can be skilled at being a webmaster. You probably already know that we decentralize our webmastering to each department with some help from IT, Jeff Adams, when we need it, for sure. But webmastering would certainly be part of this. I had a conversation with Dr. Adley, because I know there was some conversation amongst the Board of Education about communication and perhaps similar need on the education side. So I'd like to continue to further those conversations to see if this is one area where we may be able to share a service.
Okay. If
Krista.
And continuing on that conversation, is 28,000 appropriate if this is a shared service, or might this individual become full-time if it's shared with the schools? I like the idea. I just wanted to say, should we be looking at a different number, or do we have time before we send it to the Board of Finance?
So I would say, you know, you got to look at if we were to do a shared service, 28,000 might be appropriate for our share of the service. We'd have to figure out if we were going to share with the Board of Ed, how do we account for that sharing? Do we pay the whole salary and they reimburse us? Or do we each pay part of the salary? So it's a good question, but the answer is really dependent on how we decide to accomplish the sharing.
I was just thinking the individual may go to full-time. A little bit to Kip's point earlier, is this, might this turn into a full-time position between the two bodies? I don't think the answer right now, but
I would anticipate that to be true, Krista, in the brief conversations that I've had. And I, you know, I don't want to mislead anyone. I'm not suggesting that the Board of Ed is ready to do this, but it is a conversation that I want to further.
Okay, and I very much like the idea that this individual would also be able to support the town and the community on the website. I think that's another, clearly a resource our constituents use, and so that would be wonderful to put that into the job description.
Sarah, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to voice my strong support for this position. I think given the information flow in the past year that is very different than it used to be. People are now looking online for their information and pushing out to our residents. This would be help us to reflect so professionally, and feel very strongly that this is something that we would very greatly value. And I think it's an incredible idea to be able to share with another town department. I see this as someone who could support, you know, the office of the Selectmen and support Kate or Jen, but also to someone who can, you know, announce new programming for Parks and Rec, or, you know, a hearing for planning and zoning, or, you know, anything else that's going on in town. You know, this is the parade route, or, you know, this is, you know, I just see this as a really valuable idea.
That Krista?
All right, back on the consultants. The emergency service review, I'm sorry. Is there a number that you would associate with that of the three, or is it just 75,000 divided by 3 between grant, wayfinding, emergency? I'm thinking if we need to massage that number in any way, what are we allocating to each of those 3 endeavors?
My number was 45 for that. That was my estimate. I would say that will be the most costly. Of the 3 possible projects.
Could you also comment then on the timing? Obviously, you have it in this budget. I don't mean to question that, but if perhaps we're seeing the wayfinding design is something perhaps not for this year, are you strongly advocating, or what is your position on the emergency?
I think that's the more important one.
I think this review of emergency services comes at a really good time as the town is growing. You know, we've talked a lot about emergency services in the world. Once we have the Corbin District and Federal Realty and the Norotan Heights Shopping Center redevelopment and the other redevelopments that are coming. So we just want to make sure that we're keeping pace with the needs of our community, that we have what we need, that the emergency services that are provided are managed and administered appropriately. So I think that this will be a great time for us to take a look at that.
Okay, you know, I clearly support it. I just didn't know if all 3 were going to move forward in equal urgency or priority.
I would say not, and if I had to prioritize these 3 items, Krista, I would prioritize review of emergency services, and right behind it, grant writing. I think we missed some opportunities because we don't have that assistance, and we might be able to do that in a way that is expense neutral, perhaps. And then wayfinding, which we will get done, but perhaps not in this coming fiscal year.
So then I'll flip it. What's the number associated with the wayfinding?
That was,
Or maybe I'm going to say proposal for a cut of the wayfinding amount. We don't need to address it now, but whatever that number is as a potential cut.
it was about 15,000 that I had estimated there.
Okay. It's for a future discussion when we get there, but I'm just highlighting it now.
Okay. If there's nothing further, I'm going to go out to town administrator budget. So you can see this budget, it's town administrator and support services, which are the services that are shared among all the departments, such as mailing costs. It represents 0.77% of the expenditure budget. There is a decrease, but that's because of a reallocation of expenditures. I don't think there was anything notable in my commentary, so I'm going to skip that. So the first part of the budget, the full-time salary, that's my salary. Some contractual obligations and contribution to my 457 and auto allowance, and a percentage of one of the admins. This is where the change came in the budget, where you see the decrease of 13%. I share an admin with the Human Resources Department, and we reevaluated this year the amount of time that she spends with each department. And so you see the decrease in my budget, you'll see a corresponding increase in Human Resources. Dues and professional licenses is up slightly. I hold a certification as a certified public finance officer. Jen has the same certification. The organization we get that from is implementing a fee next year of $175. And then professional services. This is paying for printing the annual report. We have an online survey service that we have purchased and website training for our staff. That's an ongoing, always needed thing. Telecommunications is down because the cost for my cell phone is down. Does anybody have any questions there? Krista?
Thanks, Kate. Back on the professional services, I'm just looking along. That's clipping at about $2,000 a year. Is that normal?
So last year was the first year I put money in for website training for staff. We haven't been able to do that this year because of COVID. So yeah, the 2,000 was normal in the past, but we were trying to get that website development for staff. Now, if we were to hire the PIO, we could probably get rid of that at some point.
Okay, so maybe put a circle around that. And my other question was back down on operating supplies. Do you have enough there?
Okay, I think you're looking in the other section. Let me go out to that.
I'm sorry, I'm at expenses, operating supplies. Down there on the bottom, your 85% cut. Just big cut.
Oh, that's channel 79. And that was their request.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I think last year, if I recall correctly, we bought a specific piece of equipment for them. That was not capital, but it came out of this line item.
Okay. No, then thank you.
Yeah.
Kate, when possible, and I noticed this in the Board of Selectmen's budget, When possible, can we add a little descriptor there in the description section?
Oh,
You know,
you mean over
otherwise no one would know that's TV 79.
here? Yeah, you know, so my the budgets that I run, it's kind of like the shoemaker's kids. They get the least of that extra work. But yes, I will attempt to do that. Yeah, you wouldn't know that that was TV 79.
Thank you.
They also they asked for less funding this year for their TV operators. If you see, this is TV 79 here. Printing is reduced. We found that, you know, even when we do still have printing, sorry, we adjusted to only print the final budget books. So that's a $1,500 savings there. And advertising, we're able to do a lot more of our advertising online. So we're not having the cost that we have had in the past.
That may be codified in legislation this session as well, which would be great.
It would be. Okay. Are there any other questions on this area? Yeah, Krista.
I'm sorry, now moving over to revenue,
Yep.
parking tickets.
Yep.
You just talk a little bit about what your thoughts there?
COVID.
As
We are, if you look in, you know, based on what we're seeing, you know, I think I might have cut it a little bit too much now, but we're not seeing the level of parking. And, you know, one thing that has happened, because there's so few people parking, we're not ticketing right now for daily parkers who are parking in the permit lot before 9:30.
okay.
You know, we don't really care. It'd be kind of silly to try and keep them out. So we're just not seeing the level of activity. And this would be just the tickets on town-owned lots. We're just not seeing the parking activity this year. I think we can take another look at that number and maybe adjust it upwards, you know, upwards a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being optimistic as this is budget for next year that we will hopefully see more commutation and goodness knows their cars are back on the road. But perhaps, yeah, if we could take a look and that a little bit. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else here? All right. I'm going to go to human resources. Very small percentage of our budget, less than 0.5%, but pretty important. And as I was saying, in my budget, what you're seeing here is the increase in the admin, reallocating the percentage between my budget and human resources. So that's where that increase is coming from. No change in actual head count. We've reduced training. We haven't been able to do much training this year because of COVID, but we are hoping to do some more training next year. And advertising, we are no longer doing a lot of newspaper advertising for employment openings. We're doing it all online, and we're getting a good result from that. Medical services, you see, is a significant increase. It includes reimbursement for physicals, drug testing for lifeguards, pre-placement physicals, an OSHA hearing program for the DPW, and then we've got $4,000 budgeted for COVID-19 tests when there's a workplace exposure. We have a reduction in the food and related supplies. That is the budget for our annual employee service program. Usually it's a luncheon. COVID actually, obviously interfered with that this year. But we are hoping that by next year, by the time we have it in the fall, that we'll be able to return to the luncheon. The reduction is because there's a change in the number of people getting the longer service awards, which are more dollar value. So you see that one just goes up and down over the years based on, how many 20-year, how many 30-year, 40-year awards we have. So do you have any questions on human resources?
My only question, Kate, is in relation to the shift of admin services. Are you sure that you have enough admin time making that change?
No.
Okay, so we'll try it.
I think what we recognized was the time Karen spends. I think what actually, in all fairness, is probably some of Linda's time ought to be allocated to my budget and removed from yours. But we get it done. We don't need, I'm not asking for any more help. We get it done.
Okay.
Anything else there before I move on? Okay. We're going to go to finance. Finance department is less than 1% of the total budget. There's no change in staffing level. So really a status quo budget. The biggest change, Jen also has the same change I did in the adding the CPFO fee to her budget. Professional services, these are banking fees. And we have a slight decrease in office supplies. Otherwise, pretty much a status quo budget. Any questions? Okay.
Could I just, on the revenue side, could I just ask, what is the current weighted average yield on the investment portfolio?
I can get that answer for you, but Jim, was there any documentation on that?
On the proposal details, Joan has provided a memo for support of her current or her fiscal 22 request. I'm not quite sure if it addresses that. I don't recall.
It doesn't address that. The main reason I ask is I'm fishing for what's the rationale for the choice in the basis points. I don't doubt that we are in the right ballpark, but she lays out 3 scenarios for what the yield would be going forward, but she doesn't really specify why she picked a number that's partway between the 20 basis point estimate and the 30 basis point estimate. So I just wasn't clear on that. So I just, since the dollar amount is identical to last year, I was just fishing for, is the weighted average yield, that we currently are realizing in that similar ballpark.
Okay, we'll ask the treasurer that question and we'll get back to you on that, okay?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Kate, I had just one question for Jen. Bloom Shapiro has just merged, or actually been bought by a very large firm out of Minneapolis. You've got a 2-year contract. Have you thought about whether you're going to put out an RFP for a new auditor or use the same one?
Well, we have 1 more year left on the contract. So this budget will be the last year on the current contract. And we did speak about their change. They plan to have the same team in place, so I would see no reason not to continue with them.
Okay, just sometimes when they go to a bigger firm, they become much more bureaucratic and they have greater, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
You'll find out soon enough because you have one more year with them. Okay,
Exactly.
thanks.
Okay, anything else in the finance area?
No.
Okay. We're going to head to the top alphabetically and go to the assessor's office. So again, the assessor's budget makes up less than 1% of our total expenditures. Very important department. They do a lot of work that gets us a lot of the money. This is basically a status quo budget. The increases in salary, that's contractual. Part-time salary, that's based on the current person's hours and wages. Slight increase in software maintenance and support, and slight increase in informational materials. That is some of the books they buy for pricing motor vehicles. And I would say the software maintenance and support, they share that software with the tax office and with the sewer department. Are there any questions on that? Okay. All right. Next is the tax collector. So I'll tell you what, I'll start here with revenues. Question was raised, just want to point out, when we look at the property tax revenue here, the current property tax line, you see us going from 137 million to 41. That 41 is what's needed to support just the Board of Selectmen operations. Since you don't address the Board of Ed budget, we're just looking at the revenue that supports your budget, okay? Going over to expenses. Basically, this is going to be a status quo budget. You see a slight reduction in the full-time salary. What we've recognized here is that a long-term employee is retiring the 1st of March, and that position has been filled, and the person will be in at a lower step than the person who's retiring. So there's some savings there. Part-time salary, that's no change from existing. Conferences and meetings is a significant increase over the revised budget, but if you look at it, it's not an increase over what we've paid for in the past. We just had transferred funds out of there this year because it wasn't being used due to COVID. I think one thing you'll see a lot as as you're reviewing budget is that COVID has skewed some things, like conferences, like travel, where you're seeing not much spent in the current year, not much spent in the year before, because we didn't do those things. All right, are there any other questions on the tax collector budget? Okay. Okay, let's go to a big budget. Going to legal. This does make up a little bit less than 1.5% of our budget. You note that we increased the budget. COVID has impacted it. So we break our legal budget up into 3 different types. We have general legal counsel, which is the retainer for the town attorney. That's $88,000. We are assuming $275,000 in litigation costs, and that ranges anywhere from assessment appeals to property issues, freedom of information issues. And we are including $30,000 for COVID-related items where we need legal counsel's opinion on executive orders and the like. Labor Council, you know, we typically don't involve the Labor Council in our union negotiations. What they represent us in is if we have a municipal prohibited practice complaint filed against us, any kind of labor issue that's taken to a state arbitration board. We, you know, we currently have a couple things going on, and we expect that level of activity to continue. And then the last one is Regulatory Council. That's the representation for Planning and Zoning, ZBA, and EPC. Honestly, this one can go up and down depending on the litigious nature of applicants. There have been some years when it's been far worse, some years when you can see 1920, it wasn't that bad. We did bump it up with the moratorium on affordable housing expiring. We expect that we may have more cases needed or, you know, going to court. But this one can be a shot in the dark, honestly.
A question, Kate. If the governor's emergency declarations and executive orders expire the end of April, do you think that we can eliminate the bump for COVID-related legal?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, one question. If Labor Council does not provide the services when you're negotiating contracts, what council do you use for that work?
We don't.
You don't use any council?
No, if we have an issue, if, you know, when I say that, you know, once upon a time, we had a Labor Council who participated in the negotiations. We no longer do that.
Okay.
So if we were negotiating and we had a question about the legality of a proposition, or if we felt we needed to have them write the language for us, you know, we would do that, but we don't have them sitting at the table.
Okay, so if you have an NLRB issue, you don't use our House Council, you use a special Labor Council.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Okay.
Kate, do you remember what's in the budget for litigation this year?
I'm going to say it's probably, let's see.
In the adopted budget?
I think there's more in the adopted budget for litigation, because we were coming off, the closer you are to, you know, to reval, the more suits you have. So the 275 this year is a reduction from what we had last year, because we would have anticipated more assessment appeals in fiscal 21. And, you know, even more than that in fiscal 20. So you see a little dropping down as you get away from the actual reval. Okay.
Yeah, I was trying to assess how much that decline was, because we also had the Save the Sound litigation.
That was paid for by the sewer fund.
Ah, good catch. Sorry. Yep. Okay.
If you take that 30 off, we would have been at 363. So figure that, you know, the litigation was about $15,000, $25,000 higher. Because we only bumped the budget up by $5,000 this year. And if 30 of that is for COVID, last year we assumed the litigation would be about 300,000.
Okay.
Okay.
Krista, did you have a question?
I do. Similarly, going back to the Regulatory Council line, understanding that it is a hit and miss, you would never truly know. But could you talk, but why do you feel 305 versus 2222, 161? Could that come down at all, or is that just imprudent?
You know, I wouldn't recommend taking it down. Jeremy prepares that budget, and he bases it on the number of hours and the hourly rates.
Okay.
So that is his educated calculation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on legal?
No.
All right. We're going to spend a couple seconds on probate. As you know, we share the probate court. See how big the budget is? 0.01%. We share the probate court with the town of New Canaan.
Yes.
We are obligated to pay their expenses by state statute. Jen, do they prepare this budget or do you?
I do,
So based on the current actuals?
correct, which
Yeah.
are very stable over time.
So we're going to move on to IT. And so software and support, you'll see it comes in different ways throughout the budget. This is where Munis, OpenGov, the kind of things that we share across townwide is in here. We have escrow services for the software where they have to put the code, so it's tucked away safely for us. This is our share of Munis. The Board of Ed does pay a portion of that. Telephone is in here. This is our contract with the Board of Ed, $223,000 for the services they provide us, and then some minor replacement of equipment. And I think I earlier saw Jeff Adams might have popped in. Yeah,
I did see him.
he was, if you had any questions about the capital for the police server, but anyway, does anybody have any questions on the IT operating budget? Yeah, Sarah.
We were just talking about a plan for IT.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the budget that any of those proposed ideas that would turn into possible expenses come out of?
This is where they would come out of if, but we're not ready yet to propose any of those. Or at least, let me rethink that. Some of the changes would come out of here, but some things might be capital items. If we were looking at an IT support person for the police department, that might come out of here. It might be directly in the police department budget, depending on how we decided to fulfill that need.
I think it would be appropriate at this time to say that some of the recommendations in the IT assessment are already being worked on by the IT department that don't really require any additional expenditure. Is that correct, Kate? Maybe you can expand on what those things are, like a planned hardware replacement schedule in town hall.
Right.
We're looking at, I believe, a handheld device centralization plan.
So I talked to Jeff today actually about the replacement schedule. They are very near completing that. We have talked about one of the recommendations was to be able to track all of our handheld devices and remotely wipe them. We've talked about that. We haven't gotten too deep into what we would need. There's some complications to what we would have to do because we would be implementing this after people already have devices in the field, one of the problems would be you have to wipe some of the devices clean to install the proper software. So we'd have to figure out how to address that. We've already revised the contract to provide greater detail on response times, things like that. So it is in process. There's a lot that needs to be done out of that tech assessment, and as you discussed at your last meeting, some of that needs to wait until the steering committee is put in place, which we'll be discussing at your February 8th meeting.
I just wanted to make sure if there was anything that stood out that maybe we should be putting some aside for, if there was anything high priority that we needed to address immediately.
Yeah, I think we really have to get that steering committee in place first.
Yep.
And there had been something in capital to improve the technology in meeting rooms, but I felt the other things, the other competing needs, we couldn't go forward with that. So.
Kate, I just had a question. Would you click on the telecommunications? There we go. The explanation seems to be the opposite of what's going on. Just she's showing
it does. 3% decrease.
So the budget for this year, we're actually going to come in under budget this year. So it'll be an increase over this year's actual, which will be less than this year's budget.
Thank you for that interpretation.
Okay, anything else in IT? Okay, we're going to go over to the registrars. The registrar's budget is down this year. We'll look at elections first. That's where the decrease is. So last year we had a budget for 2 election events, knowing that we had a primary and the general election in the fall. And we need to change the descriptions on these because they all say increase due to 2 election events. There's a decrease because there's only 1 election event this year. There are some items that we left a little bit higher because of COVID. Their anticipation that they would need certain supplies, but that's the real change you see. We try not to budget for unknown events, so we're not assuming any primaries, referenda, anything like that. I'll go back out to the voter registry section. This is the part of their budget for their function as registrars, not strictly elections. So this is where you see the full-time salary or the salaries for all the part-time staff in the office, the 2 registrars, the 2 deputies. Sorry. So there is no change from the prior year, despite the narrative over here. Does anybody have any questions on elections or voter registry?
Just a quick observation in the elections section, I think it was the bottom line or second one of the bottom, close to the bottom lines. There's a food and related supplies line that looks unchanged from the prior year, but we're going to have half as many elections.
That's a good point. We did ask them. So when they submitted their budget, they had not reduced the budget for the fact that there would only be 1 election. We did ask them to resubmit that, and they didn't change that. I'll look into why.
Yeah, that seems to be just like a little slip, you know?
Yeah. Jen, you're fast. You see, she's already fixed the narrative. Okay, anything else on elections? All right.
Maybe, actually, Kate, if you wouldn't mind, maybe just have them take an eye on the whole budget if there's anything else they may want to change.
Sure. Okay. We're going to go out to town clerk. This is pretty much a status quo budget. We are assuming that when the town clerk is replaced, it will be at the same salary as our as Karen was. We are looking to send our clerks to school. We have one new full-time assistant clerk that we'd like to start sending to school to get certified. Other than that, there really is travel. We are assuming going up, same reason when they go to school to pay the travel, but otherwise it should be a status quo budget, less overtime because of the less elections. Any questions on the town clerk? All right. Next on my list is beautification. Very small percentage of our budget. So they asked for a number of things this year that I eliminated. So you can see their request was, let's see. Well, the request was $60-some odd thousand, and I cut 43 out of it. Just get this in focus. So we have the lamppost, the flower baskets. It's easier to tell you what I took out. So they had asked for funding to do a no empty windows program with downtown storefronts. I felt that that was not a town function. They wanted to install a bus shelter outside of St. Luke's. Again, I don't feel that that's our function. A bike rack outside the main entrance to town hall. We do have a bike rack in the back. If the front is a better location, we can relocate that one. Again, the green roof, I didn't think that was a town function. The requesting the shrubs and trees at the Mather Center entrance, I'm not sure where that request came from. It says DPW, but I felt that was a rather high amount, and I couldn't support that. The meadow installation and signage, the meadow installation, you know, that was a discussion I had with members of beautification. One thing we noticed, we put picnic benches out in front of town hall during the summer because we wanted to have a place for employees to have lunch because of the spacing restrictions. And when we put the picnic benches out, we saw a lot of people besides town employees coming to town hall and sitting at the benches and enjoying the property. And, you know, wouldn't it be nice to make it look better? But with all the other things that, you know, I was already cutting out of the budget, I could not support the money to do that. So I did cut quite a bit out of this budget. Does anybody have any questions there? Yeah, Krista.
Kate, for those items where you felt it wasn't a town function, I don't necessarily disagree with you, but did you direct to whom they should be appealing? Is there another body whom you know could be handling these? I don't necessarily disagree with their suggestions, but where they can go?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I think the no empty windows, that's a Chamber of Commerce or property owner function. The bus shelters, I don't really know who, aside from the transit district, that would be.
So the Whole Foods bus shelter was likely installed as part of their development project. So it probably would be a collaboration with Whole Foods themselves, with permission granted from Connecticut DOT and the Transit District. I don't know who would have been responsible for installing the bus shelter at St. Luke's, but the Transit District could help with that information.
Yeah, and the shrubbery, in front of the Mather Center, I think we can work with the town departments to try and do something there.
Back on the no empty windows, is there a way in which that could be incorporated into zoning conversations with landlords and businesses? I'm thinking an extreme of a blight situation. Clearly, it's not blight.
Yeah,
but,
it's not a blight situation.
No, but something to remind landlords that they have sort of an sort of where I'm going. I don't know how we could achieve this, but not having the town pay for it.
Yeah.
I don't think, excuse me, I don't think that the town, I don't think landlords have an obligation to fill their windows. It certainly is nice, to not see empty storefronts. And I think that would be a negotiation between an interested party, the same way that we get permission to do the window painting contest through the Youth Commission. The Chamber of Commerce would be the right agency to outreach to their membership if the landlords are members, or the real estate company that might be listing that parcel would be the other partner. I would absolutely agree that planning and zoning and maybe ARB would have a role, but they wouldn't require it. That wouldn't be a role for us to say that they have to fill their windows with something, but they likely would want to be part of the approval process.
Or maybe even a way that we could just highlight, there may be other, it's a need, people are looking for space, like the window painting, just in a way to advertise this. But the Chamber of Commerce, I agree, is probably the best person to move forward with that.
Kate, not germane to beautification, but there's a couple of questions in the chat that I want to make sure we address before we go too much further. Jack Davis wants to know if revenue for the town clerk's department is reflective of market activity on home sales.
I believe it is. We can revisit that, see if a further increase is warranted. But I caution, we've been seeing a lot of activity in the current fiscal year, people leaving the city. We'll have to make a reasonable estimate about whether or not that will continue. Have we hit the peak? So we can take a look at that.
Okay, and the other question through Jack from Bert is the town expecting second half legal expenses on planning and zoning to increase? Only 83 spent, but we can discuss this later, he says.
Yeah, well, so the first thing I'll tell you about legal is that 12-month or the 6-month number is really only 5 months. The legal bills come in a month behind. And absolutely, we are expecting an increase in, I would say, I expect the fourth quarter of the fiscal year to probably be one of the most, the most expensive of this fiscal year. So yes, I expect those to increase this year.
Okay, thank you. Those are the only questions so far.
Okay. All right, so where was I?
Going to celebrations.
Celebrations. So what we have here, program expenses is monuments and ceremonies for the Memorial Day Parade. Hopefully we will have a Memorial Day Parade in 2022. Facility repair and maintenance is funding for upkeep of the monuments in town, including the cemetery, putting out flags, etc. We also provide a grant to the chamber for the holiday lights. They requested a lower amount this year. We have the ongoing request from the Historical Society for $10,000 to support the work that they do on behalf of the town. The depot grant, $53,500. And Kids in Crisis, they had not requested, they'd missed the deadline last year. They didn't get a grant request in, but they did this year for $1,500. So we did have a request received late in the game from the regional hospice, but it came in as basically I was finalizing the budget, so I did not include it. Sarah?
Kate, do we have supporting documentation for some of these grants? I think last year we were able to see.
Right, so, it's not here. We'll have to add that because I do have, we did have requests from each of them.
Yeah, we have it in our document. I'll add it in here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we did those grants, everybody had to send us the application and the supporting documentation. The other thing in here that I'll go to next, I have planning on the list next, but we're here for Harbor Master. Very small budget, maintains the buoys, maintains the the waiting list for what do you call it, where you dock your boat in the harbor. I did reduce the request for operating supplies.
Moorings.
Moorings, thank you. I'm not a boater. I reduced the request for operating supplies based on the historic actuals. He just doesn't get there. If a need comes up, I'm sure we can find the money to fund it, but based on past history, I cut that. All right, we good there? I'm going to go to planning now.
Can we go back? Still have the Harbor Master. I appreciate
Yeah, sure.
what you've done on operating supplies as far as expenses go. Do we have any documentation as to why he needs $2,000 from his 200?
No, it was, I know I did have that, but it's not posted here. And he did submit information, but it wasn't detailed. So, if you want to look at a further cut, I don't have an issue with that.
Again, I would first start with you. If you felt that the expenditures that the Harbor Master is applying for in this budget warrant the $2,000, I'm fine. But just running numbers, he's not coming close to that. So perhaps a little bit more detail.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go back to him and ask him to detail, because oftentimes it isn't every year, but some years he does invest in
Buoys.
buoys and channel markers.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move on to planning. Slightly bigger budget, a little over 1.5% of the budget. There's no change in headcount. So here you have 2 admins, planning zoning director, the assistant director, senior planner, environmental officer, and code compliance officer. They have requested funding to bring in a seasonal person. We didn't do that this year, but hopefully next summer we'll be able to. They've done that most every year, and it is very helpful with them with all the documents they need to scan and record. Overtime is up a little bit. There are a couple of the union members in this department, and they work night meetings. It's their choice whether to take comp time or overtime, and we're seeing it trending towards them taking the overtime. So that's where the increase is coming from. Otherwise, it's generally an unremarkable budget. I'm going to point out here software is down. They are in the process of switching software providers. And the 2 primary users of that software are the building department and the planning and zoning department. In years past, planning carried the full cost of the software support. Didn't think that was appropriate to continue. So the cost is being split between planning and building. So you see the reduction here in planning. And they put in for a little bit less. You know, I think I cut them on the, no, they asked for less on the office supplies. Do we have any questions on the planning budget? Okay. Next up would be building department. A little over 1% of our budget. What you're going to see here, you approved a transfer previously. You see the move from part-time salary to the full-time salary. We had for a number of years budgeted for 2 part-time building inspectors to help us get through that bubble of the redevelopment projects, and we were only ever able to get 1, and we actually had trouble getting, keeping 1. We've lost our part-time inspectors multiple times, but we got to a point where, as you know, we could no longer operate with the 1 part-time. So we did increase that to a full-time position. We don't believe it will be a long-term position, that when the bubble is passed from the redevelopment, that we will be able to reduce the staffing there back. Overtime in building is, that has more to do with events that happen, like fires or storms where we have to call an inspector in because there's been damage to a building. So that can vary widely. And they just have some other costs that, they've put in for less money for some of the things are because, like conferences and meetings where they had been anticipating the 2 part-time people, it's actually less to have the 1 full-time. You see down here, where's the software and support? Oh, up here. So here's where you see the software and support, where we reduced the planning number and we've added it in here to the building department. Any questions on the expense side of this? We'll take a look at the revenue side because this is one of our bigger revenue departments. You will see we expect the building permit revenue to drop off as, this year we're getting a lot of the permits related to the redevelopment in. So we don't anticipate the same level next year. We've also had a bump this year in all the things people have done to their homes, renovating to put in home office, swimming pools, all that kind of thing. Any questions there?
I'm not sure it's going to drop off as much as this, Kate. I think all of those home projects are going to continue. I understand there's a backlog of time to even be able to install your swimming pool by at least a year or two. So I might want to just take a look at this again before we finalize our budget.
Sure.
Jamie, I talked with a very successful real estate broker, and I would agree with you on that. There's just too much going on. And usually when people move into a home, it's not until about 3 to 6 months that they start really getting involved with changing things around. But who knows?
Well, we'll talk to Pete and see, you know, given that it's been a couple months since he would have developed this, see if he wants to rethink that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we looked at the planning and zoning issues at our last board of, I forget, at the department heads meeting, and they had a real flurry of permits being issued in December.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of a precursor to where you're going to get the actual work done.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're right. Okay. Human services is next on my list. Less than 0.5%, less than half of 1%. No change in staffing. I'll tell you, you know, they've done a tremendous job throughout the pandemic. But you can see it's status quo budget, no changes from prior years, except for this human services software. This was something that was pointed out in the tech assessment report that what they were using was not good. Allie did some research and found a database that other human services departments in other communities were using, that she believes will do what they need to do, give them a lot more information that, you know, things they're having to do by hand now, sorting, reporting, all that kind of thing. So that is the one significant change in their budget. Any questions? Krista?
I see that the department is advertising for a new administrative person. Is that just to replace an existing?
Yes, one of our part-time admins there left for a full-time job.
Okay, all right.
And so we're replacing that.
Okay, and there, you don't expect a budget impact for a part-time person?
I
Up or
would
down?
No, it shouldn't be, because we'll be looking for the same amount of hours and probably in the same ballpark. We I think they're interviewing over the next week or so. So if not by the time you all are done, by the time the Board of Finance gets the budget, we'll definitely know what that person is going to be making. So if there's an adjustment to be made, we can do that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Anything else there? The other portion of that budget is the outside assistance. These are essential needs payments where, you know, people who need assistance with the rent, utilities. We don't have any increase here. Things seem to be adequate. The blight can go up or down as, you know, as people need assistance with remediation. But this is status quo. Any questions on that?
Oh.
Yep. Krista?
I'm sorry. I don't know whether it would come into this category or the other expense bucket for human services. So much of their work facilitates the incredible generosity of the Darien community with their clients. Mm-hmm. To what extent do you and Allie feel that if that pipeline from the community changed, should we be looking to supplement or
Right
How-
now, we're
continue
not
that service?
anticipating issues with that. They do try and go to that first before hitting this essential needs account. We believe that this should be,
that all the time.
yeah. And we believe this number should be sufficient. I say, she manages it very well. She manages the resources available to her very well.
I just want to make sure she has enough if there is a change in the support because of issues with other residents, COVID related, of course, and employment related. So just want to make sure she can continue her support.
She's actually seen a significant increase in donations and support to the Human Service Department this year. And additional funding available to her through the Community Fund of Darien. So we do ask her all the time if she has what she needs. I agree with you. We want to make sure that she always does.
Thank you for saying that. I worried too. I know that with the eviction mandate that will probably be lifted at some point. I wonder if that line will change, but it's great to hear that she's got resources from others such as the Community Fund.
Okay, I'm going to go to the Senior Center. Less than 1% of the budget. There are some COVID impacts in this budget for supplies related to the lunch and cleaning and sanitizing. So, as you know, we're still not having anybody into the facility, not in large numbers anyway. Beth will do some one-on-ones, but we are hoping that in fiscal 22 we will be able to reopen at some point. So what you have here is a salary for Beth and the director. The part-time salary is a clerk, building attendants, and the chef, and a part-time program coordinator. That was a new position last year. We have not filled that yet due to the pandemic, but we are looking to fill that soon. There is a tremendous amount of activity happening, programs being run virtually in this department. So we're trying to ramp that up. I will tell you, I asked both the Senior Center and the Parks and Rec Department to be thinking about how they would use the Mather Center space in the evenings. Parks and Rec, what other programs might you want to run that you can't run now because you don't have the space? And to Beth, is there a different senior group, working seniors that you want to target that don't come during the daytime, but maybe who are running programs in the evening, or caregiver programs, people who are caring for their elderly parents at home that you want to target. So they are both working on putting together, what they would do. Clerical services, there's an increase in rate for taking the minutes of their meetings. We dropped off one of the cleanings of the one of the shutdown cleanings in the Senior Center because the Public Works custodial crew maintaining the building is doing a really good job. Beth says, we don't need that high level. Down here, you see in the food and related supplies and in the facility maintenance, this is where you see the COVID impact, supplies for compliance with public health needs. And down here, we have increased cost of supplies related to cleaning for COVID. Any questions on the Senior Center budget? Krista?
A bunch of questions, thank you. Could you step back as far as the membership of the 1860? How many of those are Darien residents?
I don't know if that's in her commentary.
Let's see it. Okay, that's a question. If
I think that's in our quarterly
it might be,
reports.
it might be in your quarterly
Oh.
report.
Okay, I'll go back to that. Thank you. And then I'm not sure I understand the 12% increase on expenditures at the end, food-related supplies and facility maintenance, as we're looking into beginning in July going forward. Do they expect a 12% increase?
It's the supplies to, I guess the question would be, when do we feel we would stop having the drive-through lunches and have lunch in person? Will there be any need to change how we do it now? Like, right now we have to bag it all up, which we wouldn't normally do. So there've been an increase in cost for those kind of things to continue the lunch program during the pandemic. Will that be necessary when we return to in-person lunches?
Um,
And what was your other question?
Well, I guess those two related increases, if we envision we are by July, August moving back, or I sort of struggled with this line item personally. They do amazing work. I just, or they put the lunches on hiatus until they can return to in-person. I don't know, but.
Honestly, boy, I wouldn't do that. I've been down there, when we first went into shutdown mode. Those first few months, I helped Beth out every day with the lunch program, and I've been down there a time or two since. Some of these people, this is their only outside contact. It's it's a lifeline for them. I wouldn't want to see us shut that down.
Okay, fair enough. And perhaps is the increase still warranted with where we are in the COVID arc?
I will drill down with Beth on what her expectation is for returning to in-person lunches.
Okay, fair enough.
If I could just comment too, Krista, on that. The lunch program is such an integral service to the senior program. And as we deliberated making the change from the Edgerton property to the Mather Center, there is a portion of the senior center constituents who really count on that meal. So for some, it's more of a need to have rather than a nice to have. And the lunch program that's been operating during COVID by no means covers the universe of people that enjoy the lunch program when it's in person. These are the 30 to 50 people that really need this lunch program.
Agreed. The numbers were small for the delivery based upon her supporting data. I just was trying to understand a 12% increase where we are. The other question I still drill back to on the program expenses. Mm-hmm. Where she's still at this point, almost double 2019.
Yeah, but 2019 stopped beginning of March. So, this is not a full year's a full year's worth of programs.
We know what was encumbered, what was used then up until March?
Well, this is what you have, 32,000.
Okay, so she's saying, had she finished the year, she would have run into up to 60?
Yes. Yeah. And you can see this year, we spent very little. So you're going to have quite a return on that budget. I think, you're.
Correct. No, it's very low.
Yeah.
And I guess just philosophically to understand, we provide this service, correct me if I'm wrong, to anybody over the age of 55. Just trying to better understand why.
Yes. Why?
Hmm.
Can you ask that again, Krista? What are you trying to, it's at the core of your question.
This amazing service, which I think is fabulous for our residents, over whatever age, now it's 55 or whatever age they would like to pick, that this is open to anybody. And I just wanted to explore a little bit. This is a service our taxpayers are providing for the state of Connecticut, Westchester County, as I understand it. And correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know how many people we have from Westchester County that are,
Okay.
I know one person from Westchester County that registered. That would be me. But so we provide programs. Some of them are educational, some of them are entertainment, some of them are safety and health related. This is a segment of our population. Let's look at the total cost. The total cost of this budget is $436,000. I'm going to guess 1,800 members. Let's assume that only half of those are Darien residents. I would lay odds, if we looked at the taxes we got from those people, it's more than double what the senior center budget costs us. We want to keep them active, keep them healthy, keep them in Darien. And we do, if a program has a fee associated with it, if we're paying an instructor, we typically charge a nominal fee. If it's a popular program where we think we might have more people interested than we have space for, Darien residents have first, they get to register first before we allow non-residents in. There's been discussion in the past about having a membership fee or a membership fee for non-residents. The Commission on Aging has not, I don't believe they've been interested in going there, but perhaps, you can raise that question again.
I think they are looking into that question. I think Beth is very open-minded to that idea.
I know Beth is, yeah.
Membership fee. And I would also point out that she's provided to us many times in our quarterly reports how many programs are provided without a fee. We don't pay anything for the program provider. So, we did make a commitment many years ago that we would support the seniors in our community. And we do support seniors from other communities as well, much in the same way that the Darien Library also supports folks who might be from surrounding towns. Yes, Sarah.
Sarah,
Yeah, no. The revenue line items for food and programs, I'm assuming you try to match food revenues to match the cost. The programs do not.
They do not, no.
Right. Is that something we look at some point, or?
I think that would be a policy discussion for the Board of Selectmen to determine if we want to have it be, self-sustaining program.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say on the membership, I believe a number of our members that are they are not now Darien residents. They once were. They've moved to other towns, but they wish to maintain their relationship with their Darien friends.
No, I by no means am suggesting that this should be closed off to non-residents, but I think I'm just being thinking of the Darien taxpayer. I'm looking at, say, the youth center budget versus the senior center budget overall. And if we're looking at having to make changes to this budget, I just looking where that could come from.
Yeah. Well, like I said, one of the things, I always feel we should do our best to keep our seniors here, not just for what they bring to the community, what they've brought to the community, but they're paying taxes and they're not drawing a lot on our services. And it's the people, the seniors who are helping pay for the education cost of the next generation. So everything
for non-residents
from here, I want to. So should we go to youth?
Sure.
So the other part of the senior transportation, I guess it's its own line. Senior transportation is the at-home in Darien service. They reimburse us the cost of the drivers and the motor fuel, so that should be a wash. And then next up is youth. Again, less than 1% of our budget. We see an impact in here from COVID. There's no change in our normal our full-time headcount, part-time headcount, seasonal and temporary. That's the staff for the camps. Where we're seeing the big change here is in the programs. Alicia provided a breakdown of the various programs, normal cost, if there was no COVID, what this would be. And then she has estimated it's costing us an additional $9,400 for cleaning supplies. But these are all no field trips, so that's less $50,000. You see all these enumerations, the COVID, additional entertainment, bringing people in since we're not going out, all the various changes in the budget as a result of COVID. If we look at the revenues, we should see a corresponding. The decrease is actually more significant on the revenue side with less campers. So any questions on the youth budget? It's one of the more deeply impacted on the town side from COVID. Okay. Then the last operating budget we have on the schedule tonight is the health department. You can see, as we go through all the individual departments, most of them are pretty small. And if you looked at the schedule, the way I set the schedule up this year was we're dealing with a lot of small budgets tonight. There is a small increase in part-time salary. It's basically increasing the nursing hours some. Would say this new part-time sanitary inspector, this existing sanitary inspector is less hours than the previous one. So with the two combined, we're up about 6 hours overall. And a lot of that has to do with new food regulations that we expect to be imposed next year, and the additional requirements from COVID. Other than that, a minor increase in software support, but generally the bulk of the budget is actually stable, with that one exception there. We have any questions on the health budget? Okay.
No questions?
All right. I'm going to pop over into the capital budget.
One quick question. I'm sorry. This is so minor and so silly, but back on office supplies.
Yeah.
Again, it's minor, but is there just bulk ordering for pens? I mean, or maybe it's more a procedural question than an actual dollar amount issue.
No, there's not. We don't. I tell you, I worked one place once where I did impose that, you know, we will buy this kind of pen. We don't do that here. Each department does their own ordering based on their needs. We do get pretty good rates from the office supply provider, but
as long as the rates reflect as if it's an entity buying bulk, of course I'm fine. I don't care what kind of pen anybody uses. I just would hate to see our be disadvantaged by volume if it is that segmented. But
no, we actually we bid out our office supplies every year.
Okay.
And we get some good prices.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Sarah?
Really quick question. Under professional services, there's a line item for retainer for medical advisor.
Yes.
I didn't realize there was a second medical advisor that we use as a retainer.
When you say second, I'm not sure what you mean.
I guess I didn't realize there was an additional individual that is used as a medical advisor.
Yes. David is
to
a
our health director.
Yeah, he has a master's in public health. This is an MD.
Got it. Thank you.
So we have one on the town side, Sarah, and the public schools has one also.
Got it.
They're
Thank you.
different people.
Thank you.
Actually, correction. They're the same person right now during COVID, but typically they're two
Makes
separate
sense.
individuals.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna move to the capital budget. See if anybody in this show. Under general government, which is primarily what we've been covering tonight. We have two items. One is revaluation services, reserving for the 2023 reval. This is setting money aside on an ongoing basis to cover the cost. And then we need to replace the server at the PD. They're at the end of their life. So that's a significant cost, but when we get to the police department budget, you will see all the software they run. I think that will be understandable. I don't think there was any, there's none of the other departments covered tonight have, oh, I'm sorry, commissions. We have $10,000 budgeted for cemetery cleanup. that came from monuments and ceremonies.
It's a capital item.
Yeah, well, we felt it was, yes. It's not it shouldn't be an ongoing every year item.
Did they submit a proposal on how they're going to spend the 10,000 so that we can
Yes.
see that it's not a recurring expenditure?
Yes, I don't have that loaded up.
It's in there if you scroll all the way down.
Oh, it is? Oh, there we go. So it won't be ongoing. I believe that, they might be looking for more next year, but we should finish up at a certain point. I would say that, it'll come back every few years.
I feel like we've struggled with how to maintain these cemeteries and the expense for doing so.
And who's doing it?
Every year, and who's doing it. So I'd almost rather see if we have the people through the Monuments and Ceremonies Commission that are willing to take on this important work, I'd rather see an annual operating stream dedicated to it and attributed through the Monuments and Ceremonies Commission.
Okay. We can look at trying to determine what that should be. Okay. Anything else?
Just from an accounting practice standpoint, can I ask why the PD server is in public general government as opposed to in the PD department?
Because it's IT, which is part of general government.
But it's department specific, right? So with the department specific software, it's allocated to the individual department. Since this is hardware that's specific to the PD, why wouldn't it be allocated to the PD?
Jen?
We can do that. We can shift it over. It's that the IT department, although they're utilized by the PD, they are IT department servers, and they manage the servers and the server closet.
All right. When we replace regular equipment in any department, desktop equipment, whatever, does that cost go to the department or does it go to the IT department?
It goes to IT.
It does go to IT, yeah.
All right, so you can make the analogy that this server is effectively similar conceptually. It's hardware, it's not software, so we keep it all bundled in the IT. It's really an accounting change. It doesn't really affect the net number anyway, or the need for the new server. So I'm okay. I was more just too curious, I guess.
All right. Is there anything else?
Any other questions reflecting on the cost centers that we've reviewed this evening? I don't see any additional questions in the chat. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We will be back here again tomorrow evening at 5:30 with some larger, more complicated budgets, Parks and Recreation, the Police Department, the Public Library, and Public Works. So we'll look forward to our review tomorrow evening. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Kate and Jen. Thanks, Jimmy.
Good night.
Good night.